Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Service Manager Joint Liaison Committee meeting, today being Thursday, September 26, 2024. Welcome to those in attendance and to those that are following us online. Before we get started, we've received regrets from Councillor Williams that she won't be in attendance, and I've just been informed that Mayor Towndale is at the Good Roads Board meeting, and he won't be in attendance with us either today. As we move forward, the agenda, the adoption of the agenda, do I have a mover and a seconder? Mr. Warden and Councillor McGillis move and second the agenda. All those in favor of the agenda? All those opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none. The adoption of the minutes. A mover. Warden McDonald and Councillor McGillis. And bear with me, thank you. I've omitted mentioning that with us today is Warden-elect Martin Lang, and Martin has recently become the Warden-elect, and welcome, Warden-elect. Our presentations. Do we have any presentations, Madam CAO, to speak of? None. And then we're going to move right into communications. And before we get too deep into the communications, I know at our last County Council meeting, I expressed some concern about the communication and the recent announcement of concerning Melissa Morgan and Lisa Smith and some of the shifting of duties at the city level, and I expressed my concern, and that's been captured, I guess, and everyone's had the opportunity to pay attention to that. But I do want to give Warden McDonald an opportunity to speak to the effect that this has.
Yeah, I just, I want to clarify some comments that were made at that meeting and just where we're coming from. I think it's important that we don't just glaze over it today when the public got our side of the story, and I would like to maybe hear from the elected officials from the other side. My concern is that we were not informed, that we basically found out through the grapevine, and then we got an email, telling us what was happening. I feel that we spend $4 million approximately. We have budget pressures that are coming forward in the next few months through this, and we fully understand you are the service provider. You make the final call. For us, we've been working very hard on communication, and I feel a move of this nature and this size perhaps should have at least warranted, maybe an emergency meeting online just to tell us about it and just so we can process it. I did speak to Lisa this morning, and I have full confidence in her, doing the job, and I have full confidence in Melissa going over to do the other job for now. In the conversation that I had with the mayor, he also did said that there was going to be maybe a review of how everything is working, and it's always a good time to do a review when you have some people that have left and some people coming in. I just have some concerns about whether it's going to be if interim means 2 months or if interim means 12 to 18 months. So those are my concerns.
Thank you, Warden. And we did ask if there was comments from elected officials on that.
There. Well, I want to apologize very sincerely for the fact that you heard about this through the grapevine first. It's so regrettable when that happens. Certainly no disrespect intended on our part. I think we were caught and trying to do a fast turnaround, and we neglected to inform the absolute most important party. Our partnership is so essential to all the work we do through the counties and in the city that we certainly would never intentionally do anything to hurt that relationship. We value you much too much. And I secondly regret it because it looks like maybe there was some hesitation or doubt on our part as to the capabilities of both Melissa Morgan, who has stepped into a really extensive and broad portfolio, and to Lisa Smith, who is obviously taking over what Melissa's portfolio had been here. So on both those counts, we're very sorry, and believe me, we would hope nothing like this ever happens again, because not just that it's budget time, this is a long-term, long-standing relationship, and we certainly don't want anything negative to ever impact it. We value you much too much.
Thank you very much for your comments. And again, just want to reiterate, we have full confidence in your staff, all your staff, and it's not for us to tell you who can, but communication is the essence of our relationship, and so I very much appreciate your comments. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you both for your comments, and I think it's fair now that we move on and we get our Provincial Offences Court update. Please.
All right, good morning, everybody. So I just wanted to briefly start off with a very quick overview of the POA service areas. I think it's important to just talk about it right before we present the first draft budget, so there's an understanding of what we do. So essentially there's three areas that POA provides. There's prosecution, administration, and courtroom support. So with prosecution, the prosecutor prosecutes various offenses, which includes a lot of key factors. So being prepared for court, gathering evidence, preparing legal documents. They appear in court, both in a trial court and in an appeal court. And they also have the ability to negotiate early resolutions through the POA process. And they also address disclosure requests, which can sometimes be quite extensive. The administration factor of the POA court, so they accept tickets from agencies. The officers and agencies bring the tickets right into the administration. There's a process to ensure that they've complied with the regulation. They enter and accept payments into the provincial system. They manage requests from the public, including motions, reopenings, various court forms, assisting them with those forms. And newly mandated is I've mentioned it previously in other meetings, the approving of extensions of time to pay, reopenings, and fail to respond dockets, which are convictions of fines that go into default. So those used to be completed previously from the judiciary. So now they're being processed internally at our court system. And we also complete collection activities. That is an ongoing process that is a key initiative for court. The courtroom support component, so we provide support for all court proceedings in the POA court. So we have staff that administer the court reporting, the liberty recording, so every court is recorded, and that process has to be done properly. We monitor trials and court days. We ensure accurate records. That's a key component as well of the judicial system, and ensuring that the documents are endorsed accordingly. We also coordinate trials and facilitate the court, smooth proceedings in the court. So facilitating trials is very difficult sometimes if they're complex, because you have to ensure the agent's availability, defendant's availability, judicial availability, prosecutor. So there's a lot of parties involved to ensure that everyone is coordinated for those days. So it's really quite interesting, and our staff are very talented in completing those functions very well. So all of these components ensure an efficient court system. So with regards to the POA budget for 2025, there's really two key changes that I wanted to highlight. Number one would be the reduction in revenues. This is an existing trend that has been occurring for many years. We peaked in 2006 with 30,000 tickets, and the revenues and tickets have declined since. So with the 2025 budget, I am taking into consideration the existing trend as well as where we're at to date with the revenues in the 2024 year. Should any changes come along through the year, whether there's any fines that come up that are extensive, or any additional tickets that come in, or trial dates that might have an impact on revenues, I'll consider those as we go along through the budget process. For expenses, one of the items that I'd like to discuss and bring to the attention of the committee as well as to our council members in the near future is I will be looking at adding an additional staff to the POA budget in 2025. This position would be more of a junior prosecutor position. The business case that I'd like to outline for this position has many different components. So since 2023, we've had an increased workload in the for the provincial prosecutors across the board. And the reason for this is due to the dash cam footage and the body cam footage that officers now wear. So these cameras, they're used in all traffic stops and have caused an abundance of requests in disclosure when an individual requests a trial date or wants to contest their ticket. So this has slowed not only the resolution process, it's slowed the time to get disclosure available and submitted to the defendants and agents. But there's also a factor of now trial time being extended due to the video footage. So previous to these videos, a trial could have been a very short trial, 15 minutes, or, I mean, I'm sure some people you may have remembered the time when there was 150 people in our hallway for 9 o'clock in the morning and trials were just boom, 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 done. Now it's with the video evidence and video footage, they have to be watched as part of evidence, dash cam, body cam. The review of the evidence is now much longer. So the time it takes to get to trial is getting further and further away for defendants. So there's some things we can do to help expedite those things. The other item that I want to mention regarding a new position would be that we're not the only ones experiencing these delays. The whole province is experiencing delays. And they're also experiencing shortages in licensed paralegals. And to add to that mix, we are a designated French bilingual court. So we have that added effect of needing a licensed paralegal, bilingual, and knowledge of the POA system. So there's a couple of factors that I'd like to get ahead of for succession planning. So as part of succession planning for our existing prosecutor, it would help deal with our existing workload, specifically with disclosure. We have an opportunity to reduce some costs in other areas, such as we don't have a lawyer on staff, we do have a supervisor lawyer that oversees the municipal prosecutor and deals with conflict of interest cases with our municipal prosecutor. So if we had a secondary prosecutor, it would eliminate the need of the conflict of interest cases. We would be able to expedite early resolution processes because we could have one prosecutor dealing with early resolutions while another one's in trial. So we're able to expedite some of that workload. It also would allow us the ability to handle disclosure requests more promptly, more efficiently, and quickly. And also, last but not least, in the absence of the municipal prosecutor, we would have somebody to be able to jump in and take on the functions of the court in the event of the prosecutor being ill. We wouldn't require the need to have our supervising lawyer attend, which is a higher cost, and through areas like vacations, other absences of conferences and things like that. So it does help ensure that a smooth process of court proceedings is ongoing. So when we look at the budget that I've prepared, just to go over the revenues quickly, tickets continue to be declining. It's an existing trend, as I mentioned, across various enforcement agencies, and we're not the only area experiencing this. Fines can be paid at any court in Ontario. The amount for 2025 has been reduced due to the fact that we now have a lot of online payment options. People don't now go into the office or into other courts to pay the fine. They are directed to our website, and we've been very successful in getting fines paid through our website or online means. And provincial surcharge and dedicated fines, this is the amount that needs to be remitted to the province. Every fine has a mandatory victim fine surcharge added to the fine. That amount is submitted to the province. One thing to mention about the gross fine revenue, when fines go into default, there are various stages of default. The first stage is the fail to respond docket that gets completed 45 days after an offense. When that conviction happens, a fee is added to the fine, which is retained by the county and distributed to the city through the portions that are through the AMC2O municipal directory. I believe it's 41.7%. And there are stages of default when the fine flows through that process. So there's another $40 fine when it goes into the secondary default that gets added. And then if it goes into a collection mode, a $30 fee is added at that time as well. And all of those fees are retained by the county, and the defendant is responsible to pay them. And they don't get cleared until they're paid. Once a fine goes into collections, and there are 3 collection agencies, anything that is added to the fine for collection fees is fully recovered. The defendant pays those fees, and they are reflected in the revenue of our fines. Any questions about revenues?
Councillor McGillis has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering how many years now have we been in arrears with people paying fines, and what's the total of the arrears of fines right now?
That would be a long process to forever, is what I want to say. There are a few things that are guaranteed in life. Death and taxes and POA fines do not ever go away. They're there until they're paid or until there is...
Okay. Even if I know years ago there was a lot of through cigarette smuggling, all this, was a fines up to $13 million, and I think you would remember that, Jamie, where we the recommendation, not only from staff, but from other sources, said we should waive because we'll never get paid. So when they waive that, are they still on the books? They still are?
Yes.
Okay.
So the fines are never gone. There's a collection process that happens, and once they go through all those channels, the ICON may purge the fines, but they're not ever gone. They are always there. So we still try to recover and try to collect on these old fines, but it's very difficult on pretty extensive fines if there's no home ownership, you can't find where they're employed, or even it's a very difficult thing to do. But we do have some that we do collect on very minimally. However, we do still collect on them. But they do not ever go away. They're still always on the ICON provincial system. We only record the revenue as it's earned on a cash basis. So we do not have outstanding fines that are on our books because it might be with the provincial system, but because we're on cash basis, we only recognize the revenue when they're paid. So if we were to look back on what the outstanding receivables are, we could get something from the province that indicates how much is still outstanding. Some of it may not be updated if there was a death or and they're fully removed after the death happens. Like, those things need to be updated. We try to keep up with our current area, monitoring those things and notifying the province at that time. But yeah.
Thank you. Further questions, comments for Rebecca? I just said something, and bear with me, please. I'm not fully versed on the challenges that you face. I do hear them. And whenever you have the fees and surcharges, and is there a mechanism or an avenue for not just our situation, but throughout the province, for the courts to see that, or see a support whenever there's lengthier trials because of the body-worn cameras and other challenges, and in our area with the bilingual prosecutor, and the ability for you to be served in whatever language you choose, and that is appropriate, but I think that may grow that need. Mm-hmm. Is there any inkling of compensation or surcharges to support these as the fines, as the revenues lessen from the fines, the challenges increase seemingly dramatically? And I know I'm always weighing in about the province and downloading. This is more of the same in my mind. We do need to be supportive, but.
Mm-hmm. They'll give us money for social services first, and then they'll come back to that. And then infrastructure, and then housing, and all that. But I just want to express that I do appreciate everything that goes on at your end, but the challenges with diminishing returns and increasing expectations.
Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's on the province's radar to provide any sort of compensation for the administration of the court system. It has come up in discussion with collection groups through other POA courts. There's a group that we're working with AMO. We're looking at, because we are so regulated, even the defaulted fines and the amounts that we add to fines, that's part of an Ontario regulation that we follow. We can't administer anything outside of that regulation. We're looking right now for ways, and I voiced this to an individual at AMO. Thank God to Karma or Councillor Williams for getting me in contact with them, because it really expedited a process in a group to get a process going. We're looking for other resources to allow the ability for collections. Like we are very much struggling with, for instance, we can add an outstanding fine to a tax roll, but it has to be solely owned. It can't be owned by two people. So, which is the majority of the case, it's owned by two people. So you can't add a fine to a tax roll that is not solely owned. There are other avenues that we would like to have available where you can add a fine to a CRA account, and then through that process, we could hopefully recover the fines. But the province doesn't allow that method here, although it's done in other provinces. So that's something that we're trying to advocate for as well. So there's a lot of work involved to try and find other alternatives and means to collect outstanding fines, and we're hoping we're going to be successful, but it's not an easy task.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that answer. Is there anything else to be asked? And Rebecca, anything else to present?
I think I'm good. I can move on, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so with regards to the expenses, as I mentioned, wages and benefits have increased, and this amount is due to, I've included a full position for a junior prosecutor position as part of our draft budget process, and there'll be further discussions in the next coming months with our council to see if that is an appropriate path to follow. But changes can still be made depending on the anticipated start date or whether the position goes forward. There's also a 3% increase in salaries, anticipating the CPI index for 2025. Our policy states a maximum of 1 to 3. We're anticipating a 3, although it might be a little bit lower, like 2.6. I've reduced prosecution services by $5,000. If we are able to obtain the additional position, we will see a little bit of savings in the prosecution services. Again, very minimal changes. I've removed completely the cost of ticket scanning, as we'll be able to conduct this activity in-house, and we've been slowly working towards conducting the whole process in-house. In 2024, we were able to do that all solely by our staff. So I've removed that cost. The next most significant change is the cost of support services. I've mentioned this in the past through budget process, but support services is the cost of running a department from other internal departments. So the cost of the building allocated to that department. So the courtroom, the court administration office, the JP's area, the prosecutor's area, that is all based on the cost of running that area. IT support, finance support, insurance, like there's a combined amount of factors that go into that calculation, which we use the old provincial method of determining those support costs that we still do today. So that number is $9,500 and still may fluctuate based on new information if I receive it towards the closer to budget time. I've removed the satellite course lease completely. Ironically, satellite courts are still not running, and I'm not sure that I've seen any indication that that will ever go forward again with the way the Zoom court works now, and that we have online means, and it just doesn't appear to be something that is being looked at by the ministry. So I removed the cost completely. ICON is the provincial system. I'm just estimating an increase in fees for the software costs of $3,900. When I receive more information from the ministry, that also might be reduced a little bit. Escort, witness, and reporter fees. This is something that we've noticed over the last year or two since we've had online options. They're able to participate via Zoom. So we've noticed we haven't had to disperse expenses for meals and travel expenses, which is a requirement. So being able to have the ability to enter the courtroom by Zoom means has been really helping with those types of costs. Judicial services, as I mentioned earlier, the trial dates that we have are lengthening, but we're not getting additional trial dates. And I've noticed over the last couple of years we haven't hit our target of our costs, so I have reduced it based on historical trend. And the City of Cornwall portion is based on the AMCTO municipal directory, the population base in there, and it's about 41.7% that we share with the city. So that overall, based on the numbers that I have, is a reduction in revenues of net revenues of about $250,000. Recognize it's not something we want to hear, but I think over the years I've been asked the question: do we ever think that we'll be net zero with revenues? And I believe I've mentioned that I believe it's coming, and it seems like that's the way it's going. And there are other provincial courts that are already there, unfortunately.
Thank you for the good news. Yes, Councillor, please.
I just, anytime I hear net zero, I get scared. But, so could you explain that to me? Some courts are already at net zero? So our provincial court has always generated revenue for the county and for the city, and we distribute that revenue. The fine revenue has always been greater than our expenses, so we've been lucky in the fact that it's been supporting the rest of our budgets. But as we get closer to lower revenue and increased expenses, there could be a point in the future where our tax base will be covering the cost of the court system. Smaller courts have experienced that gap closure a lot quicker than us, but that's the trend. Thank you.
Anything further for Rebecca? Seeing none. Thank you. And if Chief Lister could speak, come up and speak to the paramedic services report, please.
Good morning. So this report, it concentrates on second quarter reporting and a few operational items. Overall, it's not looking too bad. Salaries and benefits are overspent a little bit, mostly attributed to overtime. Our mandate is to staff the minimum staffing levels. We are experiencing some absenteeism. Some is good absenteeism where they're maternity or paternity leaves. We tend to go through a cycle of that. We're in one of those cycles. So we're increasing the population of the area. So that's contributing to some of that. It's hard to plan for that. It's a little higher than we normally do. And the second part is long-term absence resulting from illness. That's trending up, even though we're putting a lot of initiatives into keeping people healthy and providing strategies for mental health. We haven't seen a plateau on that yet. So that's about 1% of the there is a slight operational change where we're asking medics to do training on their own time, and we're paying them double time to do that. And that's a reflection of it. So when a medic does training, we have to replace them from their road duties to come into the classroom to do training. So it's, in effect, we have to pay two people two salaries. We're asking, and it's purely just to keep the service running, so we don't have to find replacement workers, and they've agreed to do that, which reflects in the overtime budget, and it will be compensated in the replacement of part-time hours. Purchases of goods are pretty much online. Medications are really tricky and expensive and hard to find. But we're doing fairly well with that. We're not running shortages or not able to run programs because of it, but the cost is high. The shortage is significant enough that the suppliers are also trying to work with us in that they provide us like almost end of month supplies with the agreement that if we don't use it because it's so close to the expiry dates, they'll take back full packages. So they're trying to work with us on, it's a bigger issue than just costs going up. It's also a scarcity issue. But overall, the purchase of goods is pretty much on track. We did get the financial, late, most of the time we get this May, June. Late is July. This year we got it in August. That the province is going to fund the ambulance service at about $9,700,000, which is more than we budgeted for, but still less than their 50-50 contribution limit. And that's an ongoing battle. They continually lag on the 50-50 funding. In operations, we're almost totally complete of our capital. So we're just entering into the remounting of the 3 ambulances that we talked about in 23. We've finally got an ambulance so that we can get that project off the ground. So we're just moving through into that. The only other capital project that we haven't completed, but it should be done by December, is the replacement of the old public access defibrillators. Those are the ones that hang on the wall in the white cabinets. We anticipate that will be done before the end of the year. Some of the other stuff we talked about, the major overhaul of the radio systems within the ministry, which could be Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Health, has been undertaken. That's a big operational issue. So every ambulance had to go through a removal of a radio and then reinstall. Every antenna has been redone, and the only thing left is the towers. And they'll go live on that sometime early 2025. That's huge for improved communications, and it allows us to move forward in future projects. We did, our bidirectional is working well, which is data movement. The province hasn't moved away yet from voiceover, so they're duplicating the services until they have confidence that they can drop one. That will save a huge amount of airtime so that we can, we're not waiting to communicate with dispatch. MPDS, that's the priority system on how calls go out, seems to be working. We're seeing a net improvement in the time sensitive and the time critical calls. We've been keeping a close eye because it's a new system on how much time are our ambulances spending outside the area and an offload delay. That was our big concern going into this. Because the two call categories, purple and reds, it's universal. Doesn't matter who owns the ambulance; it could be assigned anywhere in the province. In April, we saw 9 calls. In August, we saw 19 calls. The concerning factor is they're time sensitive, yet when we get to the hospital, they're not considered time sensitive. So we sit there in offload delay forever. I shouldn't say forever. Between 45 minutes and 4 hours is the trend or the range that we're monitoring. And we're trying to address this through the province in that if you can separate the purples, which are being treated as emergencies in any hospital, from the reds, then the issue will go away. So we're trying to negotiate some strategy on that, and we'll see where that takes us. The last resort would be to the technical term that's used on the road is temporarily unavailable, where we would announce to the dispatchers that the cars outside the area can't be used. That's an operational issue. It doesn't feel right because you could be driving by a purple or an urgent call or a life-threatening call. So we want to only use that as the last resort. The last thing to report at this meeting is we issued the service issued 3 letters of agreement with or support to the base hospital so that we can do alternative care. Some of them we already do, some are amendments to that, such as the palliative care program, where we treat palliative care in home and we don't transport them to the hospital. They're expanding the program on that, so they needed a letter of support. There's some mental health movement where we can start using drugs that aren't just to reverse an overdose, it's to help with addictions management. So it's a new drug introduction and alternative site if the community can support that. So instead of taking a person who has a substance abuse issue to an emergency department, if they're stable, we could take them to some other place, like a detox center type thing. And then the third one is low acuity, which means people who aren't really super sick after they've been assessed. We could find alternative treatments for them, which could include our community paramedic program. This is the first time the province has recognized the community care program in a 911 setting. Just to keep everybody kind of in track, 911 is under the Ministry of Health, and most of the CP is under the Ministry of sorry, just drew a blank there. They're under the other ministry, and the two we couldn't put together. So for the first time, they're recognizing that we can loop back with because they are trained paramedics to be in either ministry. So it can save people a lot of time and effort to find health care by this alternative pathway. That's the end of my report.
Thank you very much, Chief. Questions, comments for the Chief? Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm curious, how often have you had to say you can't respond to a purple call, I think it was?
We've never had to say we can't respond to a purple call. It's how long it takes to respond to the purple call. Our time is fairly good on purples. We basically save one back always to be able to. Purple is, you're doing CPR. These people are like critical. If you don't get care within 15 minutes, it's going to be dire. So we backstop the whole system. So we save for purple, we save for red, and then it trickles down to the back end. we see a lot of issue with urgent but not time critical, that we're not meeting. People are complaining a lot on, including hospitals and allied services, like police and fire, saying, where are you? And we're coming. Please be patient, which is a reflection of the capacity within the system. And we're working hard to address that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cloden.
You mentioned that 25% of your staff is often long-term leave. Other than maternity and paternity, would some of that be stress?
So we did an analysis of what we could, so it gets more and more complicated from my, to be able to report on it, because we only get symptoms, we don't get diagnoses or clarification. So I did ask for just broad strokes. You've got to be careful in this business when you talk about strokes. There's everything other than mental health lasts about 20 days. It's a short-term in and out. We have seen an increase in that in musculoskeletal or occupational exposure, which is things like you're exposed to hepatitis or HIV or any of those things. Or it could be you're ill because an occupational exposure to like COVID and so on. That we're addressing through better protections. The long-term mental health issues is about, I would say, close to 19% of that.
Okay. The police chief has told us that they have a similar situation, that once a person is off for a year and a half, the chances of them coming back are very slim.
I agree with that, yeah. Which becomes difficult, so that's reflective in our part-time hours. So our part-time hours are normally overspent and our full-time hours are underspent because one is replacing the other indefinitely. And it can be a long time, more than 2 years.
Councillor Sabran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Chief Lister, the community care program, I'm kind of wondering, given the demand on the ambulance service and the paramedic services as a whole, is this starting to take in too much? Is there too great a demand on it that maybe it should be segregated into a different service or a lower level of service, so that I realize you're trying to deal with it as the same priority in many cases, and I'm just wondering as to how much of a burden it's placing on the primary reason for the paramedic services.
So this is it may be an end run, but their work helps with relieving the number of calls that the medics are doing. So if they didn't do what they do, every call that they do, and they do about 7,000 a year, ends up in an emergency department. So the time for a 911 medic to do a call, or the time for a CP to prevent a call, actually causes more ability in the 911 aspect of the world. So by being preventative in a lot of these cases, which is things like the returns to emergency departments where they often end up in long-term care or something like, or an alternative care bed, actually improves the system so that the 911 system moves more efficiently. So it's not exactly an emergency, but it does prevent the emergencies. So in the end, the net it improves the system.
Given the state of the system, I can understand the demand in that. I'm curious with regards to the information collecting process and that. Is the bulk of the service that you're providing for these community care, are these to people without doctors, without that type of resource as well?
There's quite a few cohorts. A lot are fit into the social determinants of health, or are the big ones. So we spend a lot of time with the transition from independent living to supportive living, that's a big piece of the cohort. We spent a lot of time with post-operative, and there's a big increase in that type of thing. So very shortly we'll be doing things like post prostate surgeries, catheterizations and so on, which the end goal of a lot of this is the shorter people stay in the hospital and managed at home, the better the whole system runs. So when the 911 cars come in, there's a place for them, and that's what they're working on. So that's the majority of the cohort. Overall, we know there's about 1 in 6 people in SDNG that don't have a primary care and are using emergency as their primary access. Sometimes they use the paramedic services, either as a transportation mode or as the only way they think, or a very small percentage think they get a preferred service. But 1 out of every 6 of every patient we carry doesn't have primary care.
Thank you. Further questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, Chief.
You're welcome.
Yes, ma'am.
I think we wanted to have some highlights.
Welcome, ladies. I'm used to seeing you down there.
Exactly, right? So it's a little different with the two of us being on this end, but happy to be here. As we transition today, I just wanted to take the opportunity to, excuse me, let this group know that it's been an absolute pleasure for me to work with this group, and that Lisa and I continue to remain committed to serving everybody in the region to the best of our ability with the resources and the responsibilities that have been given to us. So just wanted to say that before I transition to Lisa, who will do the bulk of the report for you today.
Okay, great. Thank you and welcome to my first report to this committee. So I know we'll see each other more over the coming months. So as Melissa said, definitely still committed to supporting the entire region and ensuring that all citizens have equitable access to the important services we're going to highlight this morning. So as I take you through the report, on page 1 is the centralized housing waitlist information. I think the key takeaway from this report is the fact that the number of households on the waitlist is increasing. I think we were at about 520 last month, so you can see we're now at 546. So I think that's indicative of the increasing need for housing. I'm aware that the Joint Liaison Committee has asked for data to be separated out by the counties. Globally, I would like to provide more robust data around the centralized wait list to show you the inflow and outflow of applications. I think the 546 number is not telling the full story of actually what's happening in terms of how many people we've housed, how many people are coming back on. So I'd like to expand that data and also include getting data for the county area. So it's my intention to have that data ready for you for the November meeting. For the Ontario Renovates program, I'm sure everybody saw in the media that there were some discussions between the province and the federal governments around the National Housing Strategy Funds. What's happened is they have reached an agreement. We have had preliminary meetings with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. There are changes coming to what's known as the COCHI and OFI program. So COCHI is Canada Ontario Community Housing Initiative. OFI is Ontario Priority Housing Initiative. They sound the same. P means programs. So when you hear OFI, it's actually the program side. COCHI's the hard capital side, the repair work. At this point, we don't know what that future is going to look like. We don't have guidelines. So at this point, the Ontario Renovates program, we don't have a lot of detail about how it will move forward and what it will look like. I know that program in particular has been accessed by county residents. So we are waiting for more details before we can come back to you with what that will look like. Number 3 on page 2 is the by name list implementation. So currently we're sitting at 108 actively homeless individuals. That's up from the 72 that we reported in April, and I can tell you anecdotally it's up even from the 108. So what we can see again is increasing pressure in our communities around homelessness. That by name list data is representative of cities and counties. We've done a lot of work to reach out into our local community service sectors to make sure that individuals across the region are getting referred into the by name list. So we can see the pressure starting to come again around this issue. I'll just bring you down to number 2 under Housing Services Division, which is the Stepping Stone project. So that's our facility that we have in place at Parisian Manor. We are looking into what a winter 2024-2025 plan looks like. I am in conversation with the owners of that facility to see about expanded rooms and plans for future so that we can help support the folks that are in the encampments this summer. With the new encampment bylaw, there has been a more intensified approach to working with those who are in the encampments, and we have been encouraging people, right, to work with us to find housing, to come up with more permanent solutions. Ultimately, though, I do think we're going to have some folks who don't have a plan through no fault of their own. Page 3 details our asset management plan and building condition assessments. So we wanted to put this data in as a preliminary piece of information for joint liaison. This would also be coming to our council or city council as part of our 10-year capital plan. But we just wanted to start speaking about the overall ongoing need to keep our housing assets in good working order to be able to continue to offer housing to those in our community. Page 4, number 5. So I think this is some of our fun and exciting work that we're doing right now. So the Morris Glen addition, I don't know if anybody's been out and driving around Morrisburg, but that project is on fire. I don't know how else to put it. They're doing a fantastic job, not literally, figuratively. There's a roof on, it's Tyvek'd, like it's going really well because their goal is to get it fully sealed for to be able to be in there in the winter and be able to get that completed. So we're very, very, very pleased with how that's going. Our Massey Commons initiative, we are just doing some redesign work and some work with our consultants around that, but our intention would be that that project would be occupied in late 2025. Our Pitt Street initiative, which is at the bottom of page 5, is still underway. We are in the last stages of expropriating the last parcel of land that we need to be able to proceed with that project, and then there are still some Ministry of Transportation requirements that we have to meet, but we're essentially got everything redesigned. Site plans are going through, so we are in good shape to be able to ready to go with that once the expropriation has been completed. So at this point, I'll take a break and just see if you have any questions on any of the housing information that's come forward.
Thank you, Lisa. Questions, comments about what's been presented so far? Yes, sir.
When it talks to homeless people and shelters, that capacity now, I'll give you a situation I saw yesterday coming out of independent grocers. There was a chap with a bicycle, and obviously everything he owned was, and he had a little kitten with him. And he was just sitting there. He wasn't asking for any money or anything. Is there any, obviously homeless, say a police officer went by, could he stop and just say, can I take you to a place or give you some help here, buddy?
Yeah.
What you know?
So through you, Mr. Chair, like we don't have an emergency shelter facility in the community, so we've done that strategically because our focus is on we'd rather build housing, get people into more stable conditions. There are options for that individual, so there are certain short-term solutions that we can do to kind of get them stabilized and then try to help work with them to find housing. So it wouldn't be so much a police officer. We have a rapid response team in the housing department, so it's made up of 2 social workers and 2 case managers, and they will go out to any reports of homelessness in our community, and that does include the counties. So we have been out to sites within the entire region. So I would say the best way to report in when you see something like that is on the Cornwall Connect website. There's actually a section we created that you can report someone you see who you think is homeless, and then that lets us know where they are, and we go out and we find them, and we find out what their plans are and how to help them.
Yeah, because that night it rained, it was cool. In fact, we were
Yeah.
at the trailer when we came home because it was too cold to be up there. But I was thinking all night, wonder where he is.
Yeah, yeah.
Sad. And I realized some of them are mental health issues and whatnot. But I've never seen like this. I've been in the city a long time, and I've lived in other cities, and I've never seen anything like it. A number of people seem to be homeless openly. Before we talk about couch surfing, but this is beyond that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would agree. Like, I think we've spoken before about how trends around housing and homelessness shift east. So this would have been something you would have been seeing kind of more central Ontario, Toronto area, urban centers. We are no longer immune to visible homelessness, and it's coming from affordability, it's coming from the complex needs of individuals and not being able to always get access to the services that would actually be able to help them.
Yeah, the journalist in me wants to stop and ask them, how, what's your life story? How did you get to this situation? They all have a story.
But I would strongly encourage, like, for constituents or, like, let us know where they are and we will go out. Like, that's what that team is designed to do.
Thank you. Further, Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, does this Cornwall Connects, is this an evening and a weekend service as well? Because, so often nobody answers the phone after 4:30. Is somebody reading the webmail or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we actually do have a relationship with both the V-Smart team and the team at the hospital, as well the mental health crisis team. So those are our basic after-hours supports. So same thing though, if we see the report come in and if it was on like a Friday at 8 o'clock, we'll go out first thing, like as early as we can to try to find folks. But our main supports after hours are Cornwall Police V-Smart, as well as that mental health crisis team at the hospital.
And are they, like the police especially, are they accessed through Cornwall Connect, or do you phone the police directly?
Right. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. In that case, you would probably want to reach out to police directly if it's in the evening or on weekends.
Yeah. Just wonder how we can publicize that more than it is, because the question that Councillor McIntosh has is something that I hear more frequently. Who do you call when? Especially at those tough times. And then a related question is, the Ontario Renovates, is that an ongoing or it used to be intermittent, I think. Is it still, or is that all year round?
So through you, Mr. Chair, so usually what happens is there's an annual intake. So, and it's always based on when we get notification that the funding is available. So again, it's always dependent on when the actual announcement reaches us from the province and the federal government. So it's, because it's such a well-used program, we have to have an intake period. Occasionally, we haven't used all the funds, and we might do another intake at some point through the year, but to be able to make sure everybody has equitable access to it, we usually try to control how people apply so we can make sure there's a fair process to get the funds.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just following up on Elaine and Claude. I find it a bit concerning that if you report a person that is in need and the response isn't exactly instantaneous, how do you find a person that's been reported, say, up at 9th and Pitt Street, and you're going out the earliest available opportunity the next day? The person that, the gentleman that Claude made mention of, or Councillor McIntosh made mention of, his worldly possessions are in his backpack. He's traveling around the city on a bike, and I can tell you for the past 3 nights, He has been sleeping on the bench on the street next to the Cornwall Public Library and that. And I've stopped and I've asked if there's anything, and I'm getting the, don't bother me. And I understand mental issue and that sort of thing, but my point being, this person has been identified from what I understand and that, and yet the time that you feel that is most possibly needed to be there in response, we do it the next earliest opportunity the next day, kind of like after we punch in sort of thing for the day shift. I don't know. It just doesn't sit well with me.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure that's completely how it, I'm going to just maybe give more details to help explain. So that individual in particular, we have connected with them. We are supporting. So our team knew that we typically would see him there at 7 a.m., so our team shifts their day. So there is some flexibility that we can work within. But again, we're very responsive. Like if we can get out on the same day within like as quickly as we can, we do. That team is actually very effective at working with individuals that are homeless, and actually those other two services that I referenced being mental health crisis and VSmart, that we have a coordinated system of response because frankly no one agency can completely service this complex of an issue. So when we're aware of where they are and if it's outside of regular business hours, we will try to adapt to that.
Through you, Mr.
CAO Fleury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to add to Lisa's points, the team has identified a series of more complex needs, as Councillor McIntosh was highlighting earlier in terms of mental health and addictions response. And, at the municipal level, we're not unique that some of those most challenging situations where an individual might not want help, that doesn't mean that our team hasn't engaged or that the various partners, and we're constantly, and we're having more advanced discussions through a new program that the province has launched, which is called HEART, to try to look at ways of responding as a community, and community agency, health agencies are engaged with Lisa on trying to find more complete strategies. But individuals do have rights, and when issues are complex and they're refusing help, it does lead to unintended situations as you've described.
Thank you for your comment. Anything further? Please carry on.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to our Children's Services Division, page 6. Again, I'll just point out that item number 1 gives you a sense of licensed childcare spaces within the region and how many are located in which areas of our community. I think a key point, though, is there is no wait list currently for childcare fee subsidies, so that has remained status quo. On page 7, just pointing out that recruitment survey table, the above table is just essentially showing that the sector is struggling to recruit and retain early childhood educators. So even with the investments that have gone in around wage enhancements, it's still a difficult sector to be able to recruit and retain those positions, and that's generally what impacts the availability of childcare spaces within our community. On page 8, item number 5, again, just to kind of highlight the implementation of the CWELC program. So starting January 1st of 2025, we will have a new cost-based funding approach for childcare operators. Again, that's coming out of directives that we're receiving from the province and just additional details that we get around how that program is to roll out. So again, there's another reduction in fees for parents that's planned for that time period as well. And then childcare at that point would be capped at $22 per day. For our Ontario Works case, oh, sorry, I think there was a question. Nope, okay. So Ontario Works, page 8, number 1. Again, the overall caseloads have decreased down to 2,092, and we saw that in August of 2024. So that's just kind of, again, is giving you a picture of the flow of Ontario Works case support in our area. Page 9, the asylum claimants that have been residing at the Dev Center. I think this is an important one just to spend a bit of time on. So as you know, we found out in early July 2024 that they would be terminating the contract at the Dev that was through previously held by IRCC. At the time, there was a commitment to have the folks who were residing there either rehoused or relocated by the end of September of 2024. And then at the time, the IRCC support that was offered to those clients at that time would end as well at the end of September. So what we can tell you now is that there are approximately 12 claimants still residing at the Dev Center. There's a family of 6, and the rest are solo folks. The Dev does have a plan to relocate the majority of those individuals, and we are working collaboratively with IRCC to be able to come up with a plan for the family of 6 because they'd like to stay in the community, but their barrier right now is housing. So we're trying to see what we can do to support them to be able to stay. What we are seeing is a slight upward trend in refugee applicants or refugee claimants coming to the Cornwall area. We think this is coming from, they've got now friends and family who reside here, and they've probably heard it's a great place to be, and they would like to come settle here as well. So we are just seeing that trend. So at this point, we've got, of our total Ontario Works caseload, 208 of those individuals are refugee claimants at this time, just to give you a sense of the flow. So again, before we move into the Q2 financials, which Melissa will do, I just wanted to see if there were any questions on the Ontario Works area. Yes?
Please, Councillor, go ahead first.
The claimants, do we work with local companies, Olymel and Walmart and these places to maybe help them, steer them towards jobs?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that was all available to them through the Dev Center and IRCC. Like, that was part of the supports that were provided, and organizations like the Eastern Ontario Training Board and others have been helping individuals to secure employment where they could. So that was part of that whole slate of services that was being offered.
Okay. I think the wave has receded, hasn't it? But I think that the election south of us is could be a determining factor here if the wave comes back. Because when a potential president talks about kicking everybody out of the country, they're going to head for that border before at night of the election, I would think so. I think we could be experiencing another wave. Mm-hmm. Niagara Falls was being used, and Niagara Falls said, stop it. This is hurting our tourism business. Do you know if they closed up Niagara Falls for the summer, or were they still at intake? Yeah. Matthew, I think that's the answer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the complex web of agreements has continued to evolve. The situation that led to irregular crossing, like Roxham Road and so on, is completely shifted to major urban airports. So the welcome has been in the Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver regions. And through that, the provincial, municipal, and federal sector are coordinating. We've been at several tables with the city partners, Peel, Niagara, Toronto, Ottawa, and us in the Ontario context. What's happened is that those agreements with IRCC and the province has shifted to primary response. What we had become at RCC and at the Dev was a secondary location where asylum seekers, claimants were in urban environments for 90 days, 100 days, and then were offered to come to regions like ours afterwards. So our understanding is that there are now less funds available for those secondary moves outside of the large urban centers.
Yeah, that was the segue to my next question. When this all started, I remember the meeting at OPG, government people were there, and they were talking about helping us with funding because I talked to a couple nurses that work in triage, and they tell us that has increased quite a bit. There was ever funding? Do we ever get any funding from the feds? They made a lot of promises and everything, but we didn't ask for this. They told us you're going to be taking them in.
So the three of us have been working at, I'll answer because it's a complex one. We were dealing directly with the deputy minister federally at IRCC. During that time, they concluded an agreement with the province of Ontario. So several hundreds of millions of dollars were transferred to the government of Ontario to then allocate to municipalities. Those funding streams were not direct to us because we don't have a local shelter system. So the way we responded was in tracking costs at several levels and repeatedly engaging with the equivalency at the provincial level. And so far, although we have received funds in certain areas, it didn't cover our entire cost for our local response. We're still active with the provincial government on that file, but there's no new costs so far that have been entertained, although we're continuing to see risk relating to IRCC leaving the DEV and the claimants having found residency or employment in the Cornwall SDG area. And if that employment or that housing is compromised, then we risk seeing an uptake in our housing wait list. So, but I would say that we haven't worked through those channels officially, but we have an understanding with IRCC that it is their responsibility, and if such trend happens, that we would re-engage with them. And I don't know, Lisa or Melissa, if there's anything else to add.
I just find it strange that the only people making money in this game is DevCorp. They're getting huge dollars to feed and board these folks who, meanwhile, we take a hit because when DevCorp switched over, our room tax, we lost all that revenue. So we lose the revenue, and plus they download the problem on us, and DevCorp walks away with a ton of money.
If I can just through you, Mr. Chair, further to CAO Fleury's comments, we did receive one-time funding from the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services for the 2024 year to support staffing and some benefit needs to asylum claimants. That funding was only for 2024. There is a new funding formula through Ontario Works that we've had the benefit of receiving additional funding for to help support 2025 costs. It is a 50-cent dollar, so we are cautiously optimizing as much as we can without increasing significantly tax-based dollars in the 2025 budget.
It would be interesting to see what the province of Quebec got.
Please go ahead.
So speaking of budgets, so I'll just provide a quick update on the Q2 financial statements for Human Services. We are trending favorably at mid-year with Human Services. Our salaries and benefits are on budget. Because of a delay in occupancy in Pitt Street and the 550 McConnell, that means we've had some reduced occupation or operational costs and utilities and those types of services in 2024. And building maintenance projects were deferred to later in the year. So there is some reduced savings there. Our overall budget on rents and services, our snow removal, as an example, exceeded our annual budget, but there are other savings that we have throughout the year that are going to offset that. Financial transfers, usually we do our contributions to reserves right at the beginning of the year. OW benefits are higher than predicted because that was due to our fluctuating caseloads with respect to asylum claimants, the fluctuation of asylum claimants, but those benefits are 100% provincially funded. And then we flow the Building Safer Communities program through here. Again, it's 100% funded. Our revenue is on budget, so for Human Services, we are projecting a very favorable year-end result in our 2024 budget.
Thank you, Melissa. Is there anything else?
There is. So typically we don't report to Joint Liaison for Glen Stordon Lodge, but we did think it was important to provide you with some information there because there are some impacts to the 2025 budget. So what I'll do is provide you, it's not in your budget package, or excuse me, in your packages. It will be a verbal update for you. So I'll start with the Q2 variance for Glen Stordon Lodge, and then Lisa can provide you some additional information with respect to some of the initiatives that have been going on with Glen Stordon Lodge. I will say at Q2, we are noting a less favorable expected year-end budget for Glen Stordon Lodge. This is mainly due to salaries and benefits. One of the things that's not in our 24 budget, but we're adjusting that in our 25 budget, is the PSW wage enhancement. It is 100% provincially funded, so it is an in and an out with respect to variances with revenues and expenses. We had one FTE that was not in the budget that was brought in to assist with additional cleaning during outbreaks. Currently, the lodge is in a double outbreak right now, and we hope, knock on wood, that by the end of this week we'll be out of one, if not both of those outbreaks. We have seen some very unique recruitment. When we prepared the 2024 budget, recruitment was very scarce. We were at probably a 30% success rate in our recruitment, and so that is primarily how we budgeted going into the 2024 budget. Some of the areas are, many long-term cares are experiencing those recruitment challenges with respect to some of the different levels of classifications, whether it's an RN or an RPN as an example. What that has required is in some of those key areas, we cannot be without those key positions, and so has required us to bring in agency staff. And certainly when we're in outbreak, and as we have been in this last bit, our staff have been impacted by the outbreak as well, and so they were getting sick. So we have to keep up our service to our clients, and so that required us to bring agency staff, and as we all know, agency staff are often 2.5 to 3 times more expensive than a regular employee that we would employ. We did bring a detailed, not necessarily a financial report, but a detailed staffing report to City Council. The lodge, and under Mina's leadership, has been quite successful in our PSW recruitment. We started the year with not necessarily a unique concept, but we brought in individuals into a different classification, and then we provided training to those individuals to become trained PSWs. And that was all in preparation for our service delivery review. If you will recall, in 2023, we hired a company to come in and do a service delivery review for Glen Stordon Lodge that would assist us in creating schedules that built in enough staffing so that if we experience things like outbreaks or significant drops in staff, that we would be able to successfully manage a 24/7 operation. But it also looked at the lens of the ministry mandates of the 4 hours of care, as well as the allied health hours that we would be required to meet by 2025. So we were very successful with that recruitment. So great success. It was not part of the 24 budget, and so we came to council last month and we asked for an additional increase in FTEs to support those additional PSWs that we have successfully trained. We didn't want to lose them to other long-term cares, and so council did approve an additional 22 FTEs to Glen Stordon Lodge's budget in 2024, which will impact our 2025 budget for a full year. So in October, those will probably be some of the variances you will see in the 25 budget. Some of the other things we've experienced at the lodge within this year, increased medication and consumable costs are higher than anticipated. Food costs, things like that, have increased beyond the cost of inflation or the cost that we had anticipated. And again, utilizing agency staff, we are anticipating there will be, at the end of the year, a variance, that is, we will be trending over budget with Glen Stordon Lodge, but we also received one-time funding, several $100,000 in 2024 that will offset that. Mina has provided us as part of the verbal update, which I believe Lisa will also be providing to you, that with the increase of the PSWs, despite the fact that we are in an outbreak, we have started to see our agency's costs go down. And so despite the trend we were showing in the first quarter, we are showing a downward trend. Knock on wood again, because we are coming into cold and flu and all that other fun season. So we are hoping that we'll be able to maintain that. Mina's also provided us some other updates with respect to some favorable changes we've seen with the increase of staff, which I believe Lisa's probably going to let you know about now.
Actually, Melissa, I think you covered most of it. So I think, but there are a couple quick things I am going to highlight. So the bulk of the SDR work, right, is to get us to the standards around the 4 hours of minimum care, right? So what we are seeing is improvements in that area, as well as early reductions in the use of agency staff, as Melissa indicated. The other positive to having a more stabilized workforce is the reduction in critical incidents, in critical incident reports, which already through some of the staffing changes we've made, we're starting to see, which is always a positive thing. One of the things I would note, though, where we are struggling a little bit is around ministry inspections. So they were in July. They're using a new implemented lean process that is, essentially putting some additional reporting burdens on our team and our staff. So we're working our way through that as well. Like a key takeaway is that they had to get daily reports every day as they were in there, and it really didn't leave our supervisors and staff much time to kind of get them the information that was required for their inspections. So I know that's on our radar as a potential discussion advocacy piece with the ministry. The other positive thing around critical incidents is the team has put a new tool into place just to track those, record them, so we can kind of see trends and be aware of what's happening. So again, around process improvement and better outcomes around healthcare support. So I think essentially that between Melissa's Q2 update and those quick highlights, that would get us through the bulk of what I wanted to highlight for the Lodge. And again, we would just break for questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Councillor McGillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I just want to know how many investigations do they do every quarterly, or the ministry when they have to do from the health?
Through you, Mr. Chair, are you talking about inspections? So the ministry can come in at any time and do an inspection depending on a number of things. They'll do regular inspections. If they see things like an increased reporting of critical incidents, they might come in and do an inspection just on that particular piece. Typically, they come in at least once a year, and then they come in for follow-ups on those inspections. So while we've just gone through an inspection that we're waiting to get that report, they will also come in and inspect our previous report. So we never know how often they're going to come or when they're going to come. It's all based on different factors that at their end that trigger them to come and do an inspection, if you will.
Okay.
Thank you. Further questions, comments? Okay. Thank you for the presentation. And it was my mistake. I do want to add Tracy Bailey to the mix. And if Tracy can come up and give us an overview of the challenges that we'll be facing together very soon.
Mr. Chair, if I can just make a comment.
Yes, please.
I'm just wondering, should the Lodge be at this, table? Just,
And could you expand on that, please?
Well, I think he knows what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, through you, both Maureen and I, we had a recent meeting, obviously following the engagement, to make sure that our communication flows are meeting your needs, and to make sure that we understand also your needs. And when I regrouped with the team, we for sure agree that as part of the Joint Liaison Committee, we'll start to have a regular Lodge update as well, because we're both in the same space for the governance. So we'll add that as part of our shared services update going forward.
Thank you for that update. Madam CAO.
And perhaps if I could just add on to that, I think that if we go back many years ago when we were doing shared services, the Glenstone Lodge was provincially funded and very little municipal funding was required. And we all know that that dynamic has really changed, and we even see it in the counties with our not-for-profit long-term care homes. So I think now that it's becoming, I think, more of a municipal funded service, and there are going to be some significant impacts to how we properly anticipate budgets, I think we need to find a way to bring it into the shared services forum just as a method of communication. So there's still the community of management, but I think this is a valuable tool to help everybody be prepared for, you know, what's coming in multiple years, right? So we know that this is not just a problem we have today. It might be an ongoing problem for a little while. And so I thought I think we'll also briefly talk about the shared services agreement, just that renewal, but I can talk about that then.
Thank you. So everyone's comfortable? Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good morning. I apologize that we didn't include in your agenda package a high-level update of the 2025 budget for shared services, where the City of Cornwall service manager. Like SDG, we have been going through our budget review internally. New this year to Cornwall is we will be presenting our budget to City Council prior to Christmas. So SDG will have firm numbers, I guess, going into your budget. There are financial challenges in our shared service areas going into 2025. Ms. Morgan mentioned Glenstone Lodge and our need to increase staffing due to our standard hours of care. When we look at OW and childcare, we're not seeing those same financial challenges, but we are in community housing and in land ambulance. So I thought just briefly we can let you know what those pertain to. And I believe at a special joint liaison meeting in October, we'll have those full budgets to present to you then. So I've invited Ms. Smith to come back to the table to talk about community housing and the variances there lend towards ministry funding, end-of-year mortgages, et cetera.
Excellent. So essentially in 2000, the federal government and the provincial governments devolved housing to the municipalities. So prior to that, there was an entity that existed called the Ontario Housing Corporation, heavily funded by the province of Ontario to deliver community housing across the province. At that time, too, there was heavy investment from the federal government into housing, supporting things around operations and mortgages. So at the time of devolution, funding also shifted. So at the time, the federal commitment was to maintain mortgage payments for providers. So if you built new housing, you were funded, they paid your mortgage, and there was a commitment made to continue that from 2000 until your mortgage ended. And as you can do the math, so 2000, 2024, we're at about the 25-year period where mortgages start to end. And what we're seeing is a continued withdrawal of federal investment into community housing. So for example, I believe the shortfall this year is sitting at approximately 1.6 million that was withdrawn by the feds because those mortgages have ended. So that creates pressure on our shared services portfolio to be able then to look at a way to be able to continue to support providers as those mortgages end. Other things too, just around, I think, operation of housing. You know, we just always have to be cognizant of costs are going up around things like snow removal, maintenance and repairs. So that would be the other variances you would likely see in the budget that will be coming forward. Ms. Bailey, is that?
That's our high-level communication at this time until you hear again in October from us. If you have any questions. Not good.
Thank you for that. And I guess we'll have to wait until October. Exciting times. Yeah.
Yes, we're very happy about OW and childcare, but definitely
Well,
we're not
I'm glad
seeing,
you found some happiness somewhere in this.
Anecdotally, I would be very happy to see housing funded again jointly the way childcare is being funded, because that was originally the model, right? That it was heavy investment, and that's been a upper tier shift. Yeah.
Thank you. So if there's questions, comments before you, seeing none? Okay, thank you.
I'd like to invite Chief Lister to
Oh,
join.
thank you. This continues. Okay.
It's not a continuation of good news, unfortunately.
Oh.
But the members of this committee more than likely well aware of a plan for paramedic services where we would purchase infrastructure in 2024 and place another ambulance on the road in 2025 and staff that ambulance. So in 2025, we're staffing an ambulance, and in doing so, and Chief Lister will speak to that, there's an added cost to that, and it's a direct cost related to ensuring we're maintaining or reducing our response times. Chief Lister?
Thank you. So there's two aspects to this. One, just before I do, Councillor McDonald asked the question about purples and weight, and while I was sitting there, I think I misled her in a way. I was talking to the deployment plan, not to level 0, and I think that's what she was after. Are we hitting level 0? And we are. It's minutes, but we've never seen that before, and we're starting to see that. So I just wanted to make that clarity before we go on. So in the funding formulas, there's always a lag. So any increases in the ambulance service have to be carried by the municipality for the first year, and then the 50-50 funding will pick up some of the tab. We're seeing increasing complaints about response time, and there's also some preliminary studies that have been done earlier on that talk about utility rate on what they should be in the ambulance service, and we're not at those levels. So we have to increase the staffing level. We looked at everything else that we could use to be more efficient in, which is the use of CP and everything else that we can put together. So we're at an inflection point where we have to put more people on the road. So the anticipated plan is, with the purchase of the new ambulance, we actually have a place to put the people, and we need to put a full rotation on, which is 24/7, 365, which is 8 new full-time equivalents, plus the support staff to support them, which is a significant budget pressure.
Thank you. Questions, comments before we continue? Nothing but stunned silence.
We have met internally with the administration at SDG. They are aware of the pressure it'll put on your budgets, and soon councillors of the city will see the pressure it'll put on the city's budget. It is significant. I'm not going to say it any other way, because you'll find out in a month exactly what that will be, and from there we'll have further conversations.
Thank you. Madam CEO, do I expect anyone else to sit with Tracy?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as we move on to 7.1, the discussion on shared services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So during the same discussion that CEO Fleury referenced, we were talking about the renewal of our shared services agreement. We think that it would be good, as I mentioned, to bring in Glenstoran Lodge as just a communication tool to both councils to provide information. So we'll incorporate that in an upcoming draft for changes for the agreement. The agreement also has had very specific language about meeting dates, and I know that this was something in the previous agreement to kind of, I think, get everybody to commit to meeting so many times a year. So I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to work with the CAO with the City of Cornwall to kind of work with wording that maybe those meeting dates get established early in a new year based on everybody's availability to meet, and so that we try and find optimal times and not be so rigid on specific days of the month. But we can easily, I think, do a bit of a draft on that agreement. We can bring it back to the meeting in November. But if there's, and I can circulate a draft of that, I can circulate the existing agreement to the groups so that everybody has a copy of it. If there's any other changes that the members would like to see put forward in this draft agreement, we could easily talk about that at a future meeting.
Thank you. Questions, comments, thoughts? Thank you. Thank you, Madam CEO. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor McGillis.
Thank you. Can we get a time on those dates? I have on my calendar 2 o'clock, is that correct?
So we have, oh yes, on the meeting dates on this, so the October 23rd meeting is at 2 p.m. And then the November 14th, I think we might have said 10 a.m. I'm going to look to 10 a.m. And the October 23rd meeting is really just to have a more detailed look at budgets. And then the November 14th would be kind of coming back to look at the shared services agreement and if there's any additional operational updates.
The October 23rd, what time?
October 23rd, 2 p.m. in council chambers here. And then also what will happen is when we meet in the new year, we will elect a new chair that should be on the City of Cornwall side, and then we'll have City of Cornwall host the meetings for 2025.
Okay, thank you. So if there's nothing further in 7.1, then 7.2, as we've all noticed, Councillor McDonald has some books at the ready, and she'd like to speak about some opportunities. Councillor McDonald.
I have here a display of books that I'm absolutely sure all of you have in your offices, if not in your homes. These are absolutely wonderful books. And in my apology at the beginning of the meeting, I referenced our long-standing relationship. And I have to tell you, these books alone, as well as all the other books on the history of the area, speak of that relationship and its wonderful results. So every year in Cornwall, well, we started this as an initiative to support the new Arts Centre, and I was so happy today to notice a crane in the skyline as I was coming down Pitt Street. So there's movement. But in any case, we instituted something called a Hall of Fame for the Arts. We've had a Hall of Fame for sports for eons, but had not had one for the arts, although in Glengarry you have had that, you've got the wonderful Music Hall of Fame in addition to your arts, of course. So we adopted that idea, and this year, on October 26th, we're having our usual induction ceremony. We have 7 inductees, and North Glengarry is really going to be starring on that evening. So I'm here to alert you to what's coming and invite you, please, to attend this ceremony. It would be wonderful if you did. It's a fabulous dinner with good entertainment, and of course, among the honorees, of course, first, Clive and Frances Marin. And it's so nice that they're still alive, because so often in Halls of Fame you recognize people who have long passed, but they are still alive and well. And it's remarkable the depth of the coverage of the history of the area. There was nothing written about the history of the whole area since 1945 with Harkness's book. So Clive and Frances picked that up with their first volume, which took us from 45 to 78. And then I don't know who gets the credit for starting the whole thing, but you'll recognize Estella Rose here as having been, she was warden, I believe, of the counties when the second volume was commissioned, but I kind of think that the counties commissioned the whole series. This wasn't a city project, it was the county's project, and it's very extensive, covering the city too, of course. So Clive and Francis will be honored, and then from North Glengarry, Stuart McCormick. He is being honored for his artistry, and among Canadian artists, not just local artists, Stuart's name is right up there. And if anybody has time, you should pop into the Klein House Gallery and see a wonderful collection of his works that Emily McLeod, who recommended Stuart, by the way, to the Hall of Fame. She has assembled a wonderful display of his work. And I'll tell you, if you ever go to an auction locally, I know there aren't too many live auctions now, but there were 2 last weekend. And if you ever see a Stuart McCormick come up, well, the bidding is just fierce. I mean, it's out of reach, sadly. I have yet to luck onto one myself. So I should mention that as far as the Clive and Francis Mayer book, though, that Jim Brownell was the person who recommended them to the Hall of Fame. And I know Jim is going to be there, and don't know who else. And then the third person, and this is from North Glengarry too, Dorothy Dumbrill. Now, she goes way back. But, actually, she started in North Dundas. She was a citizen of Chesterville, born and raised, and then eventually married Mr. Smith, the principal of the high school. She wrote prodigiously. It's incredible, the amount. She was a regular book reviewer for the Globe and Mail. She wrote numerous books, and one of her books was picked up by Harlequin and published, and you kind of apologize for that a little bit because Harlequin romance, isn't really great literature, but she wrote the book and then they picked it up because it had a great love story in it. So she's being honored at the induction ceremony as well. And then apart from that, there are 2 organizations in which all the counties have members, and that's a Centennial Choir, and the other one is L'Amalgame, a 20-year organization of theater and literary arts, Francophone organization. And then, of course, we always ensure that we include Akwesasne. So Mary Kawinatoke Adams, who has some of her basketry in the Smithsonian Museum in Washington and in the Vatican even. She made a presentation to the Pope with one of her baskets. So these are the honorees. Then, of course, there's Leo Motard, and that's it. That's the whole 7. So October 26th, tickets are available on Ticket Pro. Now, I did mention that we started this as a fundraiser for the Arts Center, so I can't offer you tickets because I'm not speaking here from the Council of Cornwall. I'm speaking from the arts community, and we're always begging, but we encourage you to attend. And on that note, it was pretty wonderful having the presentation of Brenda Baxter being commended for her work at the Bishop's House at the awards ceremony in South Glengarry, which I attended. And we featured the Bishop's House strongly with the first launch of this book. Now, this is an extraordinary book by Jeanette Guy. It's just out, 21 Women from Akwesasne and SDNG. And when we did the presentation at the Bishop's House, we featured women with connections literally to the Bishop's House. But I believe now, you mentioned, Tony, that you were approached in North Dundas. There'll be a launch there, too. I recall now Jeanette telling me they were trying to have as many launches as possible because the book is a fundraiser for the United Way. And, of course, we're all participants in the benefits of the United Way. So I know there'll be one coming up soon at the Klein House, and because different women are featured at each of the launches, I'll probably take in all of them. Jeanette has been an intrepid historian in the area, and she's written quite a few fiction books, mysteries. It's set in North Dundas. So that's it. Tickets are available on Ticket Pro. We'd love to see you there, and if you do make it, we'll likely invite you to give the certificates to the honorees if they come from your neck of the woods.
Where is it?
It's going to be at the Best Western, starting at 6 o'clock with Heartstrings Ensemble for the cocktail hour, and then we have Olivia Haramis as one of the entertainers. we have these 10-minute interludes between inductees. So, and she's most extraordinary person. And Michaela Francis from Wakwasasne will be entertaining during another one. And we always end with this rousing folk singer, bilingual work, Nicolas Doyon. You know, he launches into Quand le soleil dit bonjour aux montagnes, and that somehow segues into You Are My Sunshine, and everybody's singing after the wonderful operatic work that Olivier Hermes does. So it's a great night. I hope you will come. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Elaine, for bringing that to our attention. It certainly sounds exciting and a bit of good news to finish our day.
Well, it's just, thank you for pointing out to our chair that North Glengarry is the star of SDNG. I appreciate that. So,
yes, you are correct, sir. But Chesterville, my hometown, was mentioned. Never left my heart.
You might find yourselves mentioned. You should check the index of the Merrimack book.
Well, I do know in the Chesterville Record they had the police blotter. I'm not sure if they had the same in the Glengarry News. Maybe Councillor, the warden can mention that, the police blotter. Maybe the name is mentioned. Thank you, and I look to our CAO and I think of our communications officer, and I look forward to that communication being distributed, if at all possible, if I can done on staff, to have that looked after and sent out to the lower tiers, and because it is important to all of us. And thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Okay. Well, I'd love to mention this too in terms of communications. Congratulations to Steve Warburton with Glengarry Phoenix. He started, it's monthly now, but presumably could be a 2-weekly edition. He, of course, worked at the Glengarry News, and everybody misses that so much. So there's a revival in the works.
so we are working on something that we'll hope to have some information that will be launching on January 1st. So.
Excellent. You know, they talk about the Globe and Mail being a national paper. The Glengarry News was sold right across the country. People subscribed, you know. Yeah. And of course, we're happy that the Chesterfield Record is still pumping out the editions.
The Chesterville Record is still there. It didn't.
Yeah, for sure.
Just a reminder, it's still weekly, I believe. Things slide. If there's nothing else, Madam CEO, we'll move to the adjournment, or is there something
Yeah.
I've missed?
And our next meeting is October the 23rd at 2 p.m. in council chambers here at the counties.
Okay. Do I need a mover and a seconder for the adjournment? I don't recall. So we do have a mover, and we do have a seconder, Dennis Severin.